Good evening, one and all. Okay, double checking one last thing before we begin. This seems fitting for today. No, not that one. Wait a minute. It's glitched. Huh. Okay, well, I can't figure out what was going wrong there, but anyway, we're going to be beginning. So, we'll cover some of what has happened in the news today. Not right off, as usual. We'll just start drawing for a while and let the conversation begin gradually. All right. So, let's start off by updating the fire itself. Let me pull up my reference material. There are so many different styles of trying to draw fire. I'm not a fan of most of them. That one in the background, I'm not a fan of that either. I want it to be a very specific style, but I don't know how to draw it. Let's use this as my reference material. Okay. So for starters, I think what I need to do is to draw its general shape, and then I'll come up with the actual details, sharpen things out later on. I've not had to draw fire very often, and I know I'm not. That's not going to come easy. I have struggled with it in the past, so we will see what happens. What I'm going to start off by doing is try and draw layers, and then hopefully be able to make a final one based upon what I kind of discover along the way. Pull up a different reference here, because this one might not work after all. There's a lot of bad references out there. Obviously, I'm not the only one who struggles with drawing fire. But trying to find good reference material, now that is a challenge. I know the style that I want, and I can't even remember where I saw it. Part of the problem is that a lot of them are actually more akin to explosions, and while those are easier to draw, it's not great fire. Oh, wait a minute, here we go. Okay, this is a good one. Let me see what reference is. If it does it go through a step-by-step. It looks like it. Interesting. They want to have a do you want to have credit card information? Nope, I don't think so. Tell you what, browsing the web is getting more and more dangerous. Not a fan. Sites that used to be safe, no longer. Okay. So based upon how this person does it. I'm going to start off with a new layer entirely. Fill this and proceed from there. Interesting. Not quite the I like that style, but not the direction. So we want it to be almost like a sail in that sense. I think that would look pretty good. That'd be very appropriate for this, I would think. Okay, I think this is going to be a good style. Still not perfect, but if I keep working on this through the evening, hopefully I'll get the pattern down and it will be just right. I'm just going to keep working on it until I finally like the shape. Because it has to actually populate quite a lot of space here, and it has to feel natural. It can't feel like an explosion, and it can't be so small that it wouldn't justify all the content that's going to be inside of it. And I will have to move all the elements inside around to fit this new shape. Interesting. Based upon these other ideas that are shown here, it seems like okay, so I did kind of the bubble effect. Now I want to do some bands that go through, lines that help to stretch it out. Like it's going in a direction. So I got a question for people that tune in or who potentially watch later on. How do you de-escalate something? How do you say, we've gone too far, time to go back? How do you do that if people are angry and people don't know how to tone things back? I've encountered that a couple of times in my life. I myself have had to deal with this. It's not easy. When things get heated, it gets really easy to let yourself go. But in the end, it's destructive if you give yourself over to that sort of stuff. Now, there are good times for it. You have to be upset about things to really be able to make a difference. But you don't want to become so angry that you make unwise decisions. I'm afraid that there are many people in this world that rejoice in the idea of rejoice in the idea of losing themselves. Now is the time to let myself rage unabated. That's a dangerous path. And actually, that's partially one of the reasons why Milo is the character that he is. Milo is a civil man that is cast out to live among very uncivil men. He's out there not because of choice, but he's trying to maintain his dignity, his humanity, and his civility in the midst of people that have lost theirs. So how do you calm things down when they have gotten out of hand, when you've put too much fuel on the fire? How do you resolve that? Well, if it was an actual fire, you would stop putting fuel on it. That is the first and easiest way to stem things. Just stop piling on fuel. And it will start to burn down, and you will be able to manage it a lot better. But what happens if you're sitting across from somebody who keeps throwing fuel on the fire? It's getting more and more dangerous. And as the evening goes on, and you guys have been around that fire, you're like, this fire is actually getting quite dangerous. Smoke is everywhere, sparks are flying. We need to stop putting fuel on the fire. And the person from across to you says, no, make me stop. So how do you deal with the fire then? I mean, you can't just leave it. If it's gotten to a certain size, it's your responsibility to stop it. To say, hey, wait a minute, this is endangering people. This could catch the whole prairie or a forest on fire. And then the person laughs at you and says, that's the point. I want it to get out of control. What do you do then? How do you resolve something like that, where somebody becomes determined to want to cause pain and agony? You can't just walk away, especially if you have any sort of responsibility. You have to stay. But if you confront them, they probably won't understand, and they'll just see it as vindication for their anger, and they'll add more fuel to the fire. You have to start off by trying to appeal to reason, but not everyone's going to understand reason. Not everyone's going to care one way or the other. A lot of people regrettably love the pain and frustration they can cause. To them, it's a game. To them, it is a challenge. How much can you push somebody? I've seen this happen. A couple people that I know from meeting in person or past acquaintances, they love to put fuel on the fire, to escalate. And they don't want you to interfere with their escalation. Or correction, they want you to interfere, which is one of the reasons why they keep putting the fuel on the fire. So how do you stop the blaze with someone like that? It gets to be a challenge. Some people only know confrontation. and they'll only respect confrontation. There's a lot of people in this world who also only respect someone that they already agree with. Naturally, it's kind of a natural thing for us. We want to find people that we have a commonality with. We don't want people that are going to challenge us. But when you come across somebody who actually does want the challenge, who likes the thrill of the battle, well, I've met some of those people in the past, and they're incredibly difficult to reason with. Incredibly difficult. And I dare say, of the times that I've encountered them, I've been able to reason with them maybe like 1 out of 5 times. It's very difficult. You have to appeal to their morals. And if they don't have morals, well then you got a problem. For those that believe the Bible, you're able to hearken to the Bible and to find truth. If you are dealing with someone who doesn't believe in the Bible, well, that becomes a lot more challenging. And I'm not sure you're going to necessarily find success. I have met people like that where you think that you have commonality, and then suddenly it turns out, surprise, surprise, you don't. And you're left suddenly dealing with, in a way, a madman. This fire's looking much better. Still not quite there, but getting there. There was a guy who lashed out at me one day. And I really had to start thinking about ways to deal with it, because it was getting worse. Every day it was getting worse in one way, shape, or form. To me, I was able to appeal to authority. I called in some folks that were responsible, and I became the last person in that organization that was able to do that, because it caused such a headache, and people realized that there are some messed up people. And rather than have to deal with that on a regular basis, they decided to just get rid of that ability outright. So I was the last person who got to use that system to try and get somebody reasonable into the conversation. No one could do it afterwards. I'm glad I got that chance, but I feel sorry for everyone afterwards that didn't have that ability. But if you can't appeal to authority, what's your best option? Well, if at all possible, you need to walk away. If they're playing with a fire, they're going to have to get burned. You got to leave them and say, you know what? You're going down a path that's destructive. You're causing danger. I'm not going to be anywhere near when that danger happens. I'll be there with a pail of water when things get too far out of hand, but looks like you have to feel the pain of the fire before you'll understand the danger of the fire. That means somebody is going to end up in some level of harm. Milo is a character who, in the story, refuses to stoop to violence. And I chose that very specifically because I didn't want a Western gunfighter. He's supposed to be somebody that takes every other approach other than the one of violence. And there's a very specific reason for that, and it's going to be specific to his past, and it's going to make sense for where his story goes on from there. One of the reasons, though, why it has to be that way is that you can't tell a story if your character is as they say, a badass. That sort of stuff, while it looks good on cinema or something like that, it is terrible for narrative and ends the whole process of storytelling. I remember watching some role players, and they mentioned that when guns are drawn, role play stops. And it's the same thing for a story. The moment that the weapons are drawn, the character development possibilities decline fast. So you want the characters to have conflict, but you don't want them to get to the point of where one or the other ends that story arc. Think of it like this. George Lucas wrote a lot of really famous characters, and some of the most popular characters were ones that ended up having almost no screen time by comparison to the entire saga that they should have had, and they end up having very early ends. That ruins the potential for that story to really grow. You get rid of a popular character, well, you might be sabotaging yourself in the future. So, you don't want things to come to blows. You want to avoid the conflict as much as possible. Sure, you can have conflict, but you don't want to become so trite that people think that there are no stakes involved. You have to find a balance. Darth Maul is a good example. One of the most famous characters in the story, in his amount of screen time, is nil. And so they had to bring him back from the dead because they got rid of him. Well, George Lucas made a big mistake in getting rid of him. But it made sense for the story. And it made, I think, a whole lot of sense. But you cannot have a character like that be defeated if you've put so much time and effort into him. You want to have him go on a little bit longer. I know for the story it had to be that way because there was supposed to be 3 apprentices, so to speak. There was supposed to be Darth Maul representing Anakin having to take over the role of loyalty to Darth Sidious. You needed Count Dooku, a fallen Jedi who becomes more skilled than all the others, and holds to like these traditions like Darth Vader is going to end up doing. And you needed to have General Grievous showing where Anakin's broken body is going to be going and how he'll be a slave to his shell that he has to serve in from then on out. So it had to be 3 villains to represent his journey. But still, when you get rid of a character, you miss out on that opportunity to grow them. And then it's over. So when you want to have a character that people really get a chance to connect with, you want to avoid eliminating that character as much as possible. Because it could be a huge mistake. But that also applies for real life. There are people in this world that are not going to have, well, they're not going to share values with you. They're not going to be easy to persuade. But the moment you cut them off, you miss out on that opportunity to grow and mend. I'm not liking that. Let's try this instead. Might have to add some sparks like that later on. Not initially, though. There are some times that you're going to come across people that cut you off entirely. And it's a tough one. We are supposed to cut off people from our lives that are evil, that are perverted, that end up dragging us into sin, things like that. We're supposed to leave those people behind. They're not healthy for us. They cause a lot of problems for our lives and makes us worse rather than better as time goes on. But what do you do when somebody is goading you on? They want desperately for you to crack, and they're willing to go through all sorts of hoops to make you crack. Well, it's really hard for folks to be able to turn away from such people. They want desperately to be loved. And, but it doesn't mean that it's going to end up being good for you. It's going to be very, very problematic. You can't try and be friends with everyone. You can't be able to just assume that everyone is going to want to be around you. You can't assume that your efforts are going to be recognized. You can't assume that someone's going to change necessarily for the better. That's looking decent. Maybe not exactly what I was hoping for, but let's keep building up on this, see how it turns out. Kind of has a slight Disney tech style right now, and that's actually kind of what I was hoping for. So the reason why I was thinking about escalation and how you lose the opportunity to carry on the narrative the moment that conflict begins is because of what happened today. There are a lot of people in this world that down deep, they really don't want to live in an era of conflict. We know enough about our history to know that conflict will resolve things, but usually through immense pain. And in the end, we don't truly want it. And then the moment that we feel it, we're like, oh, we just want it to end. It's really hard to try and do when you've allowed conflict to grow by adding fuel to a fire. So how do you de-escalate? Well, like the fire, you have to stop the fuel. And in doing so, you'll help to eliminate the biggest way that a fire gets accelerated. But you are going to have to eventually face the realization that some people are not going to allow you to do that process. When that happens, you have to walk away. In doing so, you will deny them the ability to carry on in their venture of violence, and you'll help to avoid that problem. But you cannot deny the fact that eventually someone's going to have to go and put out the fire. Why is that stretching like that? It's grabbing colors in a weird... Oh, wait. No? Oh, wait a second. Maybe it's this. Huh. That's bizarre. It's looking decent. This actually will make it easier to draw the images on. So yeah, I'll stick with this style. So there's the back color, but then there's this foreground liquid, like flowing flame. Now I've had to deal with de-escalation before, and it's no fun. It requires something very difficult to overcome. It requires you to humble yourself, even if you're not the one that's at fault. That's a very hard thing to do. What? Humble myself? I'm in the right. Yeah, you are in the right. But the problem is that some people won't allow you to have your say if you don't humble yourself at first. You have to be able to rise above. No, I'm not saying to surrender. Let me get that straight. I'm not saying to surrender. You cannot surrender your values or your morals. But if they're not going to listen, you have to find a way to get them to pay attention. And then, after they've had a chance to cool down, you have the ability to start witnessing to them, to start giving them solutions that they normally would not listen to. I've had to deal with that a lot. People that at the start would hate your guts, and by pretending to agree in many ways, or can be very difficult, and that would require you to at least acknowledge their viewpoint. And then once you have their ear, you can start to help them to understand the flaws. But you have to approach it as somebody who agrees with them in that sense. Oh, yeah, I agree with that too. Well, I'm not saying that, but oh yeah, I've heard about that. But there's one problem that I'm trying to overcome. Maybe you got an idea for it. And then you mention the problem. And then watch the gears in their brains start to turn. And they're like, wait, I never thought about that. Wow, that's a good idea. That's very informational. Wow. I don't know what to do with that. I mean, it does sound crazy when you put it that way. Like, oh yeah, I was just wondering that because, I mean, it's a conundrum. I want to do what's good. I understand that you kind of want to do the same sort of thing. Now, it doesn't work, though, if somebody doesn't want to do what's right. And suddenly, that whole concept falls apart very fast. But it is amazing how many times I've been able to actually reason with people that historically would have probably thrown me out at the first moment that they got. And they would actually stay and listen. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that they were able to at least converse with me and not feel like they were the crazy ones. And then suddenly they're more willing to chat with you because they don't see you as a threat. And that's the big takeaway. You have to reason with them so they don't see you as the threat. And then you can start to help them understand. Now, if they reject you after that, then that's another thing entirely. But by doing that, you help them to understand without them feeling like they're being beaten over the head. That is a very real concern that a lot of people have. They can't stand the idea of basically being shamed or showed up, and they will fight tooth and nail to maintain what they think is the right worldview. And obviously, the more that you fight them, the more convinced they become that their way is the right way. So you have to humble yourself in order to break through that level of frustration that they would have. Okay, I like that fire. It's not great. I have a couple of problems with it, but it's at least workable. We'll continue from here. All right, so now we're going to move this down below. Well, actually, no, I think we'll be drawing right over top of everything else. So let's create a vector layer, and this will be our Milo layer. Let's hide the fire in its own folder. What's it doing that? Ah. There was a conversation I had with somebody that I really, really did not agree with. He was a full-blown communist. And we're not talking someone who dabbles in it. I mean, like, this guy was actively trying to sabotage the West in order to push communist propaganda. It was really weird to encounter this guy. I had a lot of problems with him, but he didn't know my problems with him. He didn't see me as an ally. He didn't see me as an enemy. And in doing that, I was able to have conversations with him. Now, he never actually came to my point of view. And that is an unfortunate thing in many ways, because he was way off the beaten trail in terms of values. But I was at least able to dialogue with him and to carry on a discussion way longer than I would have if I had tried to beat him over the head with facts, even though I really wanted to. This sort of a line is a very difficult one to try and do. It's a big enough line that it has to be, well, the shape has to be a one pass here. And the size makes it very hard to try and do. Okay, let's try and do a 2-pass. Okay, you know what? We'll just go in close. I really didn't want to come in this close because it can cause problems. Hopefully it doesn't this time. Part of the reason why is that you have to see the big picture when you're doing your outlines. Otherwise you might mess something up. At least for some things like this, where the line is is pretty messy. That's why you want to be careful of it. So the full-blown communist ended up having a lot of conversations with me, and we did not cover a whole lot of stuff that had to do about communism. But I did get to learn something about him. Something that I don't think he really wanted me to learn. And I wouldn't have learned it if I didn't get a chance to see him at ease and comfortable with dialogue. Now, he was trying to do something very nefarious. And I tried to talk him off of it, and I don't think I ever got through to him. I don't know, because I couldn't follow up with him to know what had happened. But I do know this. He got to hear the other side of a discussion for the first time from somebody who wasn't trying to kind of show him up. That was willing to have a discussion with him and not treat him as the enemy. And as such, he was able to at least listen to a couple of things that he never would have gotten to hear otherwise. That sort of thing is very hard. And you end up kind of gnawing your tongue in frustration. You're just like, I wish I could just jump to the most important bit of information here and just skip past all this nonsense. I've known people like that, where they get so deeply passionate about something, to come across somebody that doesn't agree, doesn't understand the arguments, can make them very upset. You know, it's one of the great things about Charlie Kirk, that he actually had that ability to have discussions without having to resort to shaming. That's a rare trait. Now, I confess I've not actually learned, I didn't actually listen a whole lot to him growing up. I was a little after his time of when he came onto the scene. For me, the people that were kind of in that position before him were not very successful, and so when he came along, I didn't really pay much attention. It wasn't until after a while that I thought, oh, this guy's actually doing a pretty good job, and I actually started listening to his stuff more and more. But being able to dialogue with somebody and treat them with dignity, especially when they don't deserve it, is something he was a master at, and helped him to be able to wake people up in a much better way than I think a lot of very political people have the ability to do. We're going to be going till about 12, and then we'll end it there. I think it's going to be a quiet evening, so I won't be going for too long. We'll be back tomorrow anyway. It's kind of sad to think that there are so many there's so many people in this world who want so desperately to be right that they will resort to horrible behavior and horrible violence. One great comfort that we have is that God is the one who gives the final say in such matters. Nothing happens without his approval, and we're not entirely sure why God decided that someone's time should come to an end. There could be any number of things. But you know, there's one thing that stands out to me. In recent years, now I'm not saying this is the case, but in recent years I've noticed a lot of really good commentators or teachers or whatnot falling away when they reach a certain age. It gets very hard to hold up under pressure, especially after people basically beat you over and over again with just ridicule after ridicule. And eventually it just tires you out. Some people end up compromising, and the compromise ends up making people really upset. There's other people where they just say, you know what, I'm going to step away for a while, and everything kind of falls apart. But you never know why somebody is taken. And sometimes there is a reason that only becomes clear after many months or years. And one of the things about Charlie Kirk is that he is now going to be remembered very fondly. A lot of what he does is going to continue. A lot of the things that he did is going to continue. A lot of the things that he stood for is going to continue. His legacy will live on. Maybe God was using him now to become, for his influence to be even greater because of this. That's a hard way to think about it, but that very well might be the case. The one thing that does get difficult as time goes on is that you can become very bitter. And when you see things that are unjust, it can really eat at you. I have a feeling a lot of people are going to be struggling with that over the coming days. I know that there's enough people right now that are they've just had it, that they're angry, and now they kind of want they want to address the person that is putting the fuel on the fire, and they want to stop them. And that person is not listening. And rather than being able to step away, that person is being threatening. It can't go on like this. Eventually, there has to be a higher authority that gets called upon. For all of us, that authority may never come. And it may be that we have to wait for God to step in and change things. I wonder how many of us would have patience to wait if God said, "Don't worry, I'm going to change this, I'm going to fix it." How many of us would just say, "No, I'm done waiting"? It's a hard thing to wait. I remember growing up, we would be traveling for hours and hours across country. Days, weeks traveling. After a while, we got to the point of where we would start asking, "Are we there yet?" And my parents would say, "No, we're not there yet. In fact, we're quite a ways away. Might as well, entertain yourselves." Several minutes would pass, and we would ask again, "Are we there yet?" "No, we're not even close. We're about an entire full-length feature movie away," to give us a sense of time. A full movie? Oh man, that's going to be like a full hour, before all the big epics became our go-to. So there we were, reciting movies by heart, because we were trying to entertain ourselves on the long, long journeys. Eventually, we learned to start reading the clock and start understanding how maps worked and how traveling was gauged. Pretty soon, we didn't need to ask. We understood. And so rather than say, "Are we there yet?" we would look up and we would understand, because of experience, to be able to gauge where we were and if we were there yet or not. In life, it is very hard to wait for hours, days, weeks, months, and years. And it gets more difficult the longer you have to wait without understanding why. Why do bad things happen? Why does evil still thrive? Why do we not have the ability to change things? How come every time we try and fix things, things get worse? Who's in charge? Who do we call to? All these questions start to eat at us over time. Eventually, we reach a point where we will understand, and we learn to be patient. But it comes after having to wait an enormous amount of time. I've been waiting for some things for 15 years, some other things for 20. They've not happened. Life events, opportunities, still waiting for some of those things to happen. Projects to finally take off, ideas to start to come together. It's hard waiting, especially if you don't know you're actually going to get anything. And that's one of the things that I've learned over the years. Eventually you reach a point where you stop assuming that it's coming and you actually start asking, will it change? Will things reverse? Will this thing happen? The hard truth is, a lot of things in this life will never happen. The things that you're anticipating, the things that you look forward to, they will not happen. So do we hope in vain? Not really. We hope for something else. And that's the part that's really hard to wait for. I think that the hardest thing to wait for is a fulfillment to our purpose, a fulfillment to value. To feel like what you're doing matters. That's a really hard thing to wait for. Especially if life seems to be passing you by. But when you're waiting for something like evil to be thwarted, for good to triumph, you can end up waiting on an enormous amount of time. It can get disheartening. How do you wait? How do you know that evil will eventually be defeated? The way you find that out is through faith. In faith, you start to see the patterns of life. You start to see the cycle at which God works in this world. Some things are going to be instantaneous and you're going to rejoice. There's other things where they take forever to come about. And it's a great challenge to have patience during such times. To have to deal with all the doubts and the frustrations. You know, there are a lot of proverbs in the Bible that mention about the consequences that the wicked experience. I was reading it the other day and I noticed just how many of those things don't really happen, or at least not to our understanding. See, when we read something where it says, blessed are the peacemakers, for example, and then we see someone who's peaceful who doesn't seem to be blessed, that can get disheartening, because you're like, wait a minute. If the peacemaker doesn't get blessed and the evil man or woman seems to get blessed, well, does that make the Bible true? Does it make it false? And that's one of the biggest challenges. Wading through the doubt. Waiting to hope and see if things will change, if things will reverse. Waiting to see if evil triumphs, fails. There's a lot of people right now distraught. But at the same time, they're learning something very difficult. And eventually, it will start to be a blessing to them. It's the understanding and the realization that evil is given its day, and it gets a chance to thrive. Kind of like that evil bot that is right there on the Twitch site, which I'm banning right now. Denied. There we go. Get out of here, bot. It's very hard to wait for evil to see justice. It's like, how can the Bible be true if evil flourishes? The Bible says that the path of wickedness is destruction. Why don't they see destruction? Why do people that are peacemakers or people that are godly, why do they get punishment? There was a guy that I met in my youth, and back when I was starting to read the Bible more and become more engaged with my faith, this guy was given the same opportunity. And he said something very, very difficult. And it was, he said, I don't want to be on the losing side. I was like, that's not really the same thing, buddy. There's more to the story. But for him, he could only see one thing or the other. Can I ask for free doodle requests? Greetings there, Elijah. This thing right here is actually a fan request thing. There is a redeem system that we had for that. It was using channel points to be able to do it. It's possible. It's not like a super common thing for me to do these days. What sort of thing are you thinking about? But either way, in the end, what the guy was dealing with was doubt. And that was the one thing that I got to learn from an early age about the trouble of doubt and how difficult it is to have to wait through doubt. Eventually, doubt starts to fade and you start getting more sure. And pretty soon it becomes confidence. But it's very hard to wait through those early stages of doubt. Being given a haircut by an evil barber. Oh my goodness, that's a goofy one, all right. I don't even know that character. Oh, that character. Okay, I have seen that character before. Being given a haircut by an evil barber. Well, that one would be a more complex thing to do, just because it's trying to match the look of a character. So we do have an ability to use channel points to do that. It's not visible right now because we're having some problems with it, but it is something where if you earn enough channel points, you can be able to make that sort of a request. We have done quite a few of those drawings in the past, of which some of them were goofy beyond belief. But some people really wanted them. And so honestly, they can be fun to work on because they're challenges. Let me see if I got any of those nearby. It's right here. Art. Here we go. So here's some of the things people have requested in the past. There was this. Have the Lord of the Rings books on a windowsill. Another one, somebody wanted to have a Light Fury riding on a Minecraft bee. That was a really peculiar one to try and make. There was this one. Someone wanted to have their pets drawn as pirates. And so I ended up doing that. Someone wanted to have a comic with characters that they had created. That was interesting. There was this goofy thing where someone wanted to have Johnny 64 drawn as a mall cop, and it did not turn out great. There's a lot of it was not very good. Okay, but you don't really know what you're going to get when you do the redeems like this. Sometimes turn out great, other times they don't. This one turned out pretty good. But yeah, these are the old fan redeems that people have made. Some people also make like their profile images off of it. Like this is one that was requested, and this was used by one of our viewers. He wanted to have this custom armor that he had designed, and so we ended up making it for him. I do need to get that thing all set up again for the art redeems. I got rid of them a while back, not because of, in part because we're having a lot of problems with Twitch glitching out on us, and so I ended up gutting a lot of Twitch. We also had problems with other things. We had our soundboard was glitched, so I ended up having to make my own soundboard because it was unfortunately just not working. And so I ended up having to do this so that way I could be able to play sounds whenever I want.
My name is Jeff.
So yeah, sometimes I have to try and figure out nonsensical things like that because I want to be able to still utilize it. We are going to try and tie in the art into this tool right here, so that way people have the ability to contribute to art requests. That reminds me, we also have now stickers that we're going to be putting on there. I got the stickers. Oh, they turned out well. Got two types of stickers. One is a small version of the Castercraft logo, and the other one, a larger one. This turned out really good. I'm surprised at how well the quality ended up being. That's going to go on to Silverado too. So people will have the ability to redeem those. The smaller sticker I think I'm going to use for the letters when I do the when I end up sending stuff. So I'll put it as like the seal. Because not a whole lot of people are going to want to have the small logo for stuff like that. But it'd be cool to actually have it kind of like just a little thing on the envelope. Ever since I first started drawing for these streams, my quality has gone up a whole lot. And it's something to remember is that sometimes you want to adopt a challenge because it helps improve your skills. There's a lot of things I've done that were not necessarily profitable or beneficial, but I did it because I wanted to learn and get better. That's why I'm able to do this drawing with more confidence, because I got to do all of the fan art, because sometimes it's hard to motivate yourself if nobody wants what you're doing. And so the fan art was a good way to be able to learn and get better just naturally by forcing yourself to think outside the box for sometimes goofy requests like the Johnny 64 quest. That one still baffles me as to why the guy wanted it. But some people are going to have inside jokes that they kind of are carrying on, and that was an inside joke that somebody was doing for that guy in particular. Joke didn't really fly as well as he probably hoped, but it still was comical. The rest of us got a good laugh out of it. Well, we've reached the 12 o'clock marker. I need to start wrapping this up. This was not a very long stream. I did want to get on here and, just decompress from the day's events. The thing I'll leave you with for tonight, folks, is, well, first off, if you're on one of the platforms that has the ability to like or dislike, would you consider doing one or the other? If you're on the YouTube or Rumble side, just let me know that you were there. You don't have to comment, although it does help so I know who was actually there, but you don't need to. One of the things that I do want to leave you with: civility. That is one thing that Charlie Kirk had that a lot of people do not. He had a sense and understanding of civility. I feel sorry for his family. It's deeply concerning how many people have bloodlust right now. And they went after a guy that had none. A guy who had only a desire to want to help people understand. A man who was peaceful. A man who was, yes, civil. He maintained a strong faith. He kept learning and growing, getting better at his debating skills and understanding the plight of many peoples, sometimes changing his worldview. It's a very rare trait to come across a guy like that these days. He'll be sorely missed. But something I do want to bring up is that now his legacy lives on through the rest of us. That desire for civility and kindness, that desire to want to carry on the legacy in grace and mercy. Be sure to spread some of that in your life. Demand justice, but don't demand vengeance. The Lord will avenge. It's for us to be the beacons of mercy to people, not to be idle in the protection of others, but to remember that we are here to save souls first and foremost. That's a hard one to have to wait for. Waiting for justice, that is. All right, we'll leave it right there. Thanks for coming by, folks. This was, again, a short stream. We'll be back tomorrow, continuing the same piece of artwork and getting further. Tonight we got actually quite a ways. We got the fire done, and got Milo's head drawn, so that's a positive. But the fire was the most difficult one to try and figure out, because this is the first time I've done this, and I'm going to go back and change it even more before it's all said and done. But this is the base that I'll get to create, and then I will make the mask that will be the final one, now that I know the pattern, or at least, general idea of the pattern. All right, have a very pleasant evening and morning, everybody, no matter who you are. Especially if you're somebody who has frustrations and disagreements. Regardless, be civil to one another. Show mercy, show kindness. And live by the golden rule: do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Maintain that civility. Until next time, folks, have a very pleasant evening, morning, and we will see you all next time.